All right, President Bola Tinubu on Tuesday condemned the spate of military coups in Africa, describing them as wrong and unreflective of the collective aspirations of Africans. Now, he said the pervasiveness of the coups connote a demand for solutions to perennial problems and do not imply Africa's support for unconstitutional change of government. Tinubu said this in his maiden address to his counterparts during the ongoing debate at the United Nations General Assembly in New York, USA. Now, he said world leaders must affirm democratic governance as the best guarantor of the sovereign will and well-being of the people, noting that military coups are as wrong as any civilian government that supports injustice. Now, in 2023 alone, military forces in Niger and Gabon overthrew the democratically elected government of Mohamed Bazoum and Ali Bongo, respectively. Regarding Niger, Tinubu called for support from sister countries, affirming that the Economic Community of West African States is still negotiating with the junta. The president lamented that the protracted battle against violent extremists has created a dark channel of inhumane commerce. Now, he admitted that African nations must improve their economies so that the people do not risk their lives to sweep the floors and streets of other nations. Interesting. However, he called on the international community to strengthen its commitment to arrest the flow of arms and violent people into West Africa. Now, speaking on mineral resources in Africa, Tinubu warned that the continued looting of Africa's mineral resources threatens peace and places national security. And he advised that member nations must work with Africa to deter their firms and nationals from this 21st century pillage of the continent's riches. Now, we can sum up the president's thoughts by itemizing the following problems. 1. Bad governance, insecurity, poverty, external influence, bad civilian governments, which often arise from unfree and unfair elections, and terrorism. Well, joining us virtually to make sense of this all, we have Nelson Ekujimi and Cyril Abaku. Well, Cyril Abaku is VOP in-house analyst, and Nelson Ekujimi is also a social affairs commentator. Well, must say, welcome to the show, Nelson, and good morning once again, Cyril.
Good morning, Moses and Esther.
Now, looking at the president's speech, did that meet your expectations, Cyril? Let me start with you.
So let's say yes, in a manner of speaking.
Okay.
A lot of contemporary issues affecting Nigeria, especially in the way it relates with its friends and neighbors and even foes, was brought into the picture. I wouldn't have expected the Nigerian president to have sidestepped matters such as schools in Africa. The whole world knows that Nigeria, whether it's pulling its weight or not, has features that makes it automatically or by default the continent's giant. Our population, our economy, everything we have, and the fact that in light of the recent resurgence of coups on the continent, we have kept a clean slate. We've kept a clean sheet. Again, to borrow a football term, in the sense that we've now had an unbroken democracy that has run since 1999 right up to 2023. And the fact that this is the president's own inaugural outing at ONGA, his first speech, which he did acknowledge in his opening protocol. So yes, he did pick on a lot of those things, as well as to say that for a matter such as violent extremism, issues of pillaging of and looting of mineral resources on the continent, except that these things can't happen without the active collusion of internal collaborators and saboteurs. But yes, he did strike the chord, in the sense that he mentioned the issues that the world can listen to, can hear and know. Yes, this is Nigeria, and these are the issues that the Nigerian president should ideally be addressing. That's how I'm going to open my remarks.
All right. Nelson Ekujimi, please, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you.
All right. Good morning, Nelson. Welcome to VOP this morning. In the aftermath of
Good
the
morning.
Second World War, nations gathered in an attempt to rebuild their war-torn societies. A new global system was born, and this body, the United Nations, was established as a symbol and protector of the aspirations and finest ideals of humankind. But with what we can see currently, especially towards African countries, are we seeing that? Are we seeing the United Nations putting out the aspirations and ideals of humankind, especially towards Africa?
Yes, thank you very much. I thank you for having me this morning.
You're welcome.
But the truth of the matter is that the United Nations is a voluntary international organization of countries. Countries are not forced to join. Countries that, subscribe to the tenets, to the principles of the United Nations, put in their membership, and they are accepted if they meet up with the necessary conditions. So the United Nations also recognizes that there's the international charter that implies internal sovereignty of countries. The United Nations will only admonish, will only give guidelines on how countries should do their business. The United Nations will not come into any country to come and enforce how it should do their business. If you, as a father, decide as a member of the United Nations, speaking metaphorically now, as a father, as a family, you decide that you want to be taking 1 meal per day and nobody is crying out. Even if others are taking 10 meals per day, that is not the problem of United Nations. The United Nations becomes worried about activities in your family if those activities portends negativity for the larger society or for the compound you live in. That's the way the United Nations operates. The United Nations will put in place has a lot of mechanisms to help countries to achieve the goals of the United Nations. So if you are not pulling your weight, with regards to those, principles, it is not the place of the United Nations to come and intervene in your country and tell you this is how to do it, because the United Nations recognizes the sovereignty of each member nation, to conduct.
Okay. Nelson, you still with us?
Might be forced, to invoke, some of its, charter to do the needful in your country.
All right. We have some African countries that are members of the United Nations. There is Central African Republic, Nigeria, Liberia, Ghana, Kenya, Burundi, Ethiopia, and Cameroon. Now, these countries are countries within the United Nations, and you said that is a voluntary effort. Nobody forces you to be part of it. But in these countries, there is a high rate of poverty. There is also insecurity. What specific measures can be taken to alleviate poverty and address hunger, especially issues of hunger in Africa?
Well, the issues that can be used to alleviate hunger and the crisis in Africa is for African countries and Africans themselves to recognize that good governance, democracy, availability of resources. Because a lot of times, African countries go to United Nations or to the West seeking arms. These are countries that are well endowed, to meet their needs, but due to their laziness and their inability to see through their nose that whatever they are looking for in Sokoto is in their Sokoto, like we say in my local palace. So the United Nations will not tell you to tap into your mineral resources and develop yourself. It is for you as the people and as the government of these African countries to look inward, to see where you have comparative advantage. And even don't forget that only recently we had the AFCTA, law charter by some African countries that has been signed. What does it aim to do? It aims to make Africa a single economy, such that whatever Nigeria can produce in large quantity, or that Nigeria's comparative advantage, Nigeria can also use that as against other African countries, such that the pressure on African economy seeking the West support will be limited, because whether we want to admit or not, a lot of countries in Africa are countries that share common historical ties, You look at these are countries that have people. You look at Nigeria, for example. You have Yorubas in Nigeria who share common ancestral, ties, or ancestral, or ancestral lineage with Yorubas in the Benin Republic, in Togo, and so many other places. So what we are saying in essence is that there's a need for African countries to look inwards to see how they can develop themselves, such that the issue of poverty, the issue of hunger, the issue of unemployment will be tackled. Then Africans also need to look at their judicial system. A situation whereby some persons, because they are dissatisfied with the status quo, want to resort to arms is not what should be encouraged. That is what you don't see in the West, where wherever you are dissatisfied, the judicial system is there. The Africans must learn to put in place, dispute resolution mechanism that people themselves will subscribe to. As we speak, a lot of Africans, due to no fault of theirs, have adopted this policy of, if I'm not there or if I'm not a beneficiary, then the whole thing must collapse. And because they have, a society that is polarized along ethnic and religious lines, as well as other modern sentiments, you see all these things become, the norm, whereby somebody is accused of, a crime, and, people from his ethnic part of the divide. I say, oh, is it only our son that is a thief? Is it only our son that has stolen? Where there is a coup in a country, you see opposition parties celebrating, forgetting that military intervention does not portend good for any society. You have talked about bad governance in Africa, and I ask, in what way has military rule helped the African continent? Rather, the military rule has turned the African continent into a theater of war.
All right,
look at Sudan that is
thank you very
presently at
much,
war.
Nelson.
Who are those fighting the war? Who are those igniting the war? It's
All
the
right,
military.
all right. Thank you, Cyril. Let me come to you now. Let's look at paragraph 35 of the president's speech. He talked about climate change and how it's affecting the country, affecting Africa and affecting Nigeria. He said he talked about the northern part of Nigeria hounded by desert encroachment. He talked about the southern part hounded by a rising tide of coastal flooding and erosion. Talked about all of that. Now, in light of that, does this look like, just speech?
Exactly.
Because if the president is talking about climate change and how it's affecting us in Nigeria and Africa and telling the world that this should stop, and doesn't it come to mind what just happened some months back, the bombing of oil vessels that were destroyed? The oil went back into the water, polluting the water. The fire and smoke polluted the climate, all of that. That happened in Nigeria.
Sure it did.
Now, gas flaring
Yeah.
is another thing that we've been crying about for a long time, how that also affects the ecosystem.
And loss of revenue. The challenge that we have in Africa and in Nigeria is largely man-made. They are not imposed on us by the hand of nature. And then even when we talk about climate change and what is happening in northern Nigeria, what environmentalists call desertification, that is the land eating up the sea. Israel was at the same place in the 60s or 40s or so. Agriculture became their weapon against that particular trend. In fact, around the world, the land always eats up the sea. It is only in Israel that the sea is eating up the land. The challenge is that, the president probably wouldn't be able to point to what we've done.
Yeah, but he did point to what he intends to do.
Yes, of course. Say in the past 10 years, in the past 5 years. And the challenge is not that we are short of ideas of what to do. It's about bad judgment. It's about bad leadership. The bombing of the oil vessels in the name of stolen crude on our waters didn't happen by a feat of nature. It was government decision. Didn't they weigh the pros and cons? Didn't they understand? Was there no advice to say there are better ways of handling this situation? The issue of gas flaring in Calabar and all these places, You know, when the PNLD judgment came, that was when we even began to see what government had done in the past. That rather than do what was good, they did what was wrong. So largely, if you check what President Muhammad Buhari said in the 8 years that he was at the hunger, check what Jonathan said in the 5 years that he attended hunger and so on, the challenges have remained the same. Solutions few and far between. Something has to give. The president himself also said that and again, sorry, you can tie climate change to a lot of things. Insecurity. At some point, we were told that even Boko Haram and so on was because people's main means of livelihood had been eaten up by nature, and as a result, in their quest for survival, they began to take to arms. The reality is that when you put all of these things on the table, in 10 years, in 15 years, we have not moved from where we were. Okay, and the same problems persist. Solutions are few and far between. The people, so in the end, those who in the president's words go to sweep streets and clean floors of other countries had to go there, not because they wanted to go, but because they had no chance. Somebody had jokingly said now that if the merchant ships came back, people will run
to board.
This is 1 century, 2 centuries after slavery. So in reality, it is African leaders that have failed Africa. The president also said that coups happen because perennial issues are not solved. He said that, I mean, to quote what I understood him to have said was that civilian government that support injustice, that perpetuate evil, are as bad as military governments, and those are the things that make military governments welcome, as it were, when coups take place. Look at in Niger, they came out to applaud. Burkina Faso, they came out to applaud. Mali, they came out to applaud. Gabon,
They were also happy.
they literally lifted Bryce Oligwe on the head and said, le président, le président, le président, le président. Even when Oligwe may not be himself a saint.
So
This is the problem, yes.
Okay, so if, like what you just said, in regards to what the president talked about in his speech, the problem of Africa, because he made statements that member nations, especially the United Nations, needs to do more in terms of having to make their member countries better. Don't you think that this problem, this endemic situation, is from the African leaders themselves?
But of course, that's what I've been saying. Look, the UN, at the UN, people resign frequently. Or shall I say, from time people resign because they feel this body is not
done what is needed of them.
It's not achieving anything. Number one. Number two, look at what happens at the Security Council. There's a problem in Libya, in Syria, somewhere, and they vote to say that we're going to intervene. Russia says you can't move a step. China says you can't move a step. That thing is an ego club. Okay? Then the General Assembly is for everybody. Nobody goes there for you to be lorded over another person. Nigeria joined the UN. Independence came on Saturday, 1st October 1960. Then Saturday, so that will be 7th October, right? 1960. We joined the UN as the 99th member. Whether you join as the 100th, 99th, 15th member, whatever, everybody on the UN, this General Assembly, we are all equal. There's no
round table.
It's a round table of gentlemen and women. In fact, this is called general debate, and it's not as if say you're on a seminar. It's about turn by turn. Make your speech. After we've made all the speeches, we'll come together. Maybe look at the common issues. Issue a communique. Meeting is over. It's a tea party. Nobody goes out to lord it over another person. As a matter of fact, you cannot tell me what I'm going to write in my speech as president of my country. So this sort of thing is basically when we meet jaw to jaw, we may not do war. That's the whole idea of it. That the more we meet and have discussions and meet one another, take tea, discuss investment opportunities, there will be the tendency to go to war will be less. After all, after World War I, they founded the League of Nations. It collapsed. After World War II, they now founded the United Nations, which has largely weathered the criticisms, even if people feel it's lame duck, but at least it's there, to intervene, to discuss issues, to talk. Now, in Africa, for example, the UN is involved in Mali, involved in Sudan, involved in a lot of these places. They're involved in even which countries. I mean, in a lot of countries, those blue berets, they're involved. The blue berets. We can't forget the role the UN played in restoring Congo when Moise Tshombe was trying to break away to form Katanga. The UN took it upon themselves to fight the faction, a faction of the country, and brought it back into the fold. So I would like to think that if only for intervention, I think the UN has done more for Africa than any other body has done for us. But the fact is that ultimately our destiny is in our own hands. Our leaders must sit up. This going cap your hand to beg Elon Musk, beg Bill Gates, beg Joe Biden, beg them. But we have the brains, we have the personnel, we have the manpower. Until we can do something that can reverse this brain drain organically, that can first halt it, then reverse it, okay, and make us believe in our country once again, and believe that things can work here, until we are willing to do what to make things work in our own country. How much can the foreigner do as if he do for his own country? So this is the thing that we must do. The president has gave a very lofty address. It's fine.
Lofty address.
Yes, but the facts remain that it is back here at home. Corruption, for example.
Well, he did say that. He did point to that. Let me come to you now, Nelson. Still on the president's speech. He's still talking about climate change and how it affects Africa and Nigeria in particular, and what he intends to do. Nelson, please. This is for you now. I'm going to take excerpts from the president's speech. He said, African nations will fight climate change, but must do so on our own terms to achieve the needed popular consensus. And then he went on to say that in Nigeria, we shall build political consensus by highlighting remedial actions, which also promote, some economic, and then he said projects such as a green wall to combat desert encroachment. Please help me make sense of that. Building projects such as a green wall to combat desert encroachment. How do you see that? How do you think that can be achieved?
Well, don't forget that. Let me quickly respond to the question you asked.
Okay.
It is a fact that the issue of climate change has been exacerbated majorly by the West. From scientists, the African, contribution to depleting the ozone layer, contributing to climate disaster that we have, is just about 4%. The West contributes over 95%. Its adverse effects on the African continent and its people have to be highlighted. Don't forget, we have had the 2015 Paris Agreement by the whole world with regards to climate change. As much as Africa is trying to pull its weight, the West is not doing the same thing. The West is telling us to stop the use of fossil fuel, but the West has contributed more, in the use of fossil fuel and other means of power to deplete or to endanger humanity more than Africa has done. And that is why, because the West is industrialized, that is a fact of history. And in the process of industrialization, when African countries in signing to the Paris 2015 agreement have been calling on the West, to move away, from these greenhouse gases that damages the climate, to cleaner, sources of power. So talking about building green walls, what the Mr. President was saying about green walls is that we as Nigeria or as Africans, we are going to invest more in agriculture. Agriculture is green anywhere in the world. And if we are going to invest more in agriculture, it means those factors that makes our investment become worthless must be addressed. And what are the factors that are making our investment in agriculture become worthless? It is the climate change that has made this northern part of the country, whereby there's no more water there. The grasses are no longer growing, and this has contributed in no small measure to the perennial, or intractable farmers' header scratches. You look at here in the south, even the once the herders, or maybe some people, because they cannot have a means of livelihood, they resort to criminality. That is why the farmer cannot go to his farm any longer, because some persons believe, I have a herd of cattle, and this head of cattle have to feed.
All
So
right, so
pasture.
you're saying now, saying that beyond climate change is one of the reasons why we're experiencing insecurity in that region of the country, whereby we're not having more encouragement for those who want to get into agriculture and continue their farming.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
All right.
Absolutely.
Okay, Nelson, I'm going
Yeah.
to ask you this question. Perennially, Africa is one of the countries that experiences the spike or highest rates of poverty when you consider it and unemployment. Then, of course, we're also suffering what you would call excessive population. And then in this part of the world, we have issues with data. So even if you want to compute or calculate how some measures will be taken to resolve some of these problems, because we do not really have data, it's quite difficult. But I want to throw you a question in one of the president's speech where he made a statement. He said that to foster economic growth and investor confidence in Nigeria, this is specifically what he said, I removed the costly and corrupt fuel subsidy while also discarding a noxious exchange rate system in my first days in office. Other growth and job-oriented reforms are in the wings. Now, the reason why I want to throw this at you is that we already know that once the president came on board, that was the first thing he was going to do: remove fuel subsidy as well as deregulating the forex market. But so far, it hasn't really helped. It has actually made the economy quite stringent. At what point do you think that we'll begin to experience benefits of the resolve that he made as soon as he got into office, based on what he said?
Yes, I must tell you that whenever you are taking up a reforms
Okay.
to better any situation, it comes with pains. I'm sure, as a journalist, you have listened to the U.S. Is it the business secretary? That's Wali Aderemi also, who visited Nigeria only some few days ago. And if you listen to what he said, it was in tandem with what experts have projected. What we have seen now is the pains that comes with the policy. And like we say in our normal balance, that no pain, no gain. For you to have a baby, you have to conceive. And when you conceive, it comes with a lot of inconveniences for the woman, even the man himself. The man is also inconvenienced when your wife is pregnant. Because at times when both of you are in bed, the woman starts making some sounds. So it is not unexpected. People should not expect that when this policy are being fine-tuned, or when these reforms are taking place, that it will be El Dorado for us. No, absolutely not. We must tell ourselves the truth. The fact remains that these are policies that are coming with pains, but looking at it in the longer time, the benefits have even started coming in, because for now we can see that the federal allocation between the 3 tiers of government has greatly improved. It is now almost 3 times what the states get, states and local government get, on a monthly basis. Those are part of the gains. And these gains are expected to be plowed into the economy such that, the gains will begin to manifest. But it is not something that is like a man who is building a house. You don't say because you have bought a land, you want to build a house, that tomorrow morning you are moving into that accommodation. It takes time to build a house.
All right.
If the type of house you are building is one that has so many structures, in the process of building, the rains will come. And when the rain comes, you have to stop work. And those are part of the inconveniences we are talking about.
All
So
right.
we believe that these policies will germinate, appropriately in the nearest, future ahead of us.
All right, so you mentioned foreign entities abated by local criminals who aspire to petty warlords. They've drafted thousands of people into servitude by illegally mining gold and other resources in most of these African nations. And he also said that billions of dollars meant to improve the nation now feel violent enterprises. And he went further to say that if it is left unchecked, they will threaten the peace and place national security at grave risk, which I would say in Nigeria we're already currently experiencing. So he's saying that with the rate of injustice and the high stakes involved, many African nations are asking whether this phenomenon is by accident or by design. Do you think it's by accident or by design with what is currently going on with some African countries where we have a lot of drug enterprises. We see the NDLEA try its best to try and curb this rate, but it's a consistent pattern that has grown a little bit, almost forming its own nation within a sub-nation within a nation. Do you think that these foreign nationals deliberately designed this to destabilize most of the African nations, or do you think that the government, especially Nigeria, has to do more to discourage this?
Well, I don't believe that, a foreigner can love you more than yourself. That is the law of nature, self-preservation. So if anybody assumes that foreigners will come into Nigeria and will want Nigeria or Africa to prosper, then that person must be an Alice in Wonderland. Nigerians or Africans must recognize that they have no other homeland than Africa. So it is our responsibility, is our life, mission to ensure that Africa, our country, our continent becomes better for us. You talk about the issue of mining or exploration for natural resource. If this is going on in African countries and African countries have not been able to tame it and appropriate it for its collective good, then that is their problem. It's not the problem of those who are coming in, because the laws of the land is made for the people of the country. So if you come into my home as I speak to you, one of the rules in my home is that in coming into my sitting room, you must put off your shoes. So if I allow you to bring your shoes on and you put it on my chair, and I don't tell you, Mr. Man, remove your shoes and go and put it outside, then that's my headache. That means I'm not alive to the responsibility or to the rules I've made. So African countries, African people must wake up their responsibility. Just some few weeks back, we heard that a mining site was discovered in Akwa Ibom State, and the state government was feigning ignorance. And the question I had, that state or that local government, that vicinity where that activity took place, is within a local government. There's a local government administration there. There's a state government in that. They have representatives. They have a member of the State House of Assembly. They have a member of the House of Reps. They have a member of the Senate. They even have a minister from that state. There's a DSS office in that local government. There's a Nigerian Police Divisional office in that local government. There's a civil defense office. So are we telling me all these stakeholders were blind to those acts? No, this is complicity. So if you have refused to do the needful, and you allow your visitor to come into your home, your sitting room, and turn it into a toilet, will you blame the visitor? Absolutely not. You are the owner of the house. If you want the peace of the house, you put in place everything that will make you have peace. So if African government and people are failed in their responsibility to make Africa better for them, I won't hold the West responsible, because Africa does not belong to the West. Africa belongs to Africans.
Africa
Nigeria
belongs to Africans, indeed. All right, thank you very much, Nelson. Cyril, let me ask you this now, as we make to wrap up as well. Now, the president talked about Africans going abroad to sweep streets and do those kind of jobs to survive. Now let's go back a little bit, all right, quickly too. Just before the 2023 elections, we saw Nigerians running away from Nigeria because a lot of people were not sure of what would happen after the elections. A lot of people foresaw a breakdown of law and order, so people ran away from the country. Some people sold their houses to relocate abroad without even knowing if they would have a good paying job abroad. Elections have come and gone. Now, the reality of the moment, the reality of the removal of subsidy of fuel and the hunger that has come with it is now biting deep, and a lot more people are looking to run away again. Now, the president talking about curbing this Japa syndrome, as we have come to know it. What do you think should be done differently? What is the role of education and empowerment? What role will that play in curbing this desire to run away and do some sort of kind of slavery abroad?
Yeah, so I think that, as a matter of fact, I mean, you tied it to education. educational looks to me to even be a pull factor, in a way, because Nigerians are very ambition driven. We are very goal minded. We're very always purposive. We like to bring a lot of energy to whatever it is we're doing. We like to be the first and not the last. So, in a way, I think that, for example, the medical doctors, you've read, you've gone to school, you have a degree, you can work, you can earn a living. But in Nigeria, doctors come out of medical school, sometimes for a year plus. They are looking for where to do their housemanship. At the Lagos University Teaching Hospital, a young doctor died after working 72 straight hours on the bounce. And normally you work Friday, Saturday, Sunday like that, call shift. Then on Monday you resume again to do the normal 9 to 5 or 8 to 4. And the young man passed on. Yesterday I saw a memo which the doctors issued and said that they are going to down tools. How much are they paying him? Even if he was being paid ₦1 million, how do you work 72 hours? Isn't that so? I mean, why would you be a slave in your own country when you can enjoy life a little better elsewhere, where you be regarded? A friend of mine who was located overseas, was working and had a broken shoulder, and sent me pictures of the hospital and of dinner that they served him. And I know that in Nigeria,
So basically, those running,
yes,
it's slavery there, it's slavery here.
It's slavery here. So I think they prefer the slavery where things are working. So, but not to take anything out of your question, Moses. The reality today is, I hear what Nelson is saying, but the fact is, the reason the subsidy had to go was because there was corruption in the subsidy. The president himself admitted that people were just taking the monies, but the question is, who are they? Why are we not able to prosecute them?
We've not been able to answer that.
Recoup the monies and use it to help those who are now suffering the pain of subsidy. That's one. Number two, at the NBA conference a couple of weeks ago, somebody stood up and said, you are very active destroying illegal refineries, going after oil thieves. But in Zamfara, people are mining, they are cutting away gold, cutting away all sorts of resources. It appears nobody's saying anything. The new minister of Solomon just said they should form cooperatives within 30 days. I don't know what that means. So where you are not blending, where you're not matching justice with economics, it won't work. It won't work. The reality is that all it we are going to bear from outside, the fact is, in your country, in our country today, how much did they pledge for us in India? Is it $14 billion?
$14 billion.
Then there was another thing, they said our debt profile was around $40-something million. All these monies, compared to what Nigerian politicians steal from the treasury, it now looks like very little, just some kind of chicken feed. $14 billion. When the president, before he left office in May, wrote copiously to the Senate and said, don't ask me the specifics, just approve that we pay something billion dollars, 20 billion pounds. Can't we look back at this and say, okay, let's reverse it? Even if the vice president stepped in to say, this piano judgment, let's even look at it. We could have gone to say that we are owing so and so a company this humongous amount of money. I think if we will be more deliberate, serious, determined and conscious about how we run our economy, we are not supposed to be going capian and begging. The internal collusion is and when the president talked about internal people who are the internal saboteurs, I don't know what they use there, internal saboteurs in a country. These internal saboteurs, are they people on the street? They are not. They are people who have capacity to incapacitate or to decapitate institutions so that they are not able to function while what Nelson calls a complicity, while these evils are committed. So two things. Somebody who came going to visit the president stayed in Nassau Rock to threaten to issue a statement and say, all those that Assad was saying, hold on. So months later, when Ganduje became chairman of the APC, he went to visit Ganduje to say he came to congratulate him for becoming chairman of the APC. Clearly, it means that we are not yet really ready to address these matters.
We'll take your thoughts again when we wrap up. We'll take your thoughts again. But in the meantime, we have to go to what we have coming up next. Nelson, would like for you to also stay on with us as we go into the other topic that we have for discussion this morning. Well, up next on VOP this morning, paid the ultimate price for their country in the course of duty in Imo State. Now let's head into that conversation in a bit. Stay with us.